Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host Omar Khalid. But today is the 8th of August 2024. My name is Omar Khalid and we are here to discuss important issues that pertain to Pakistan and the globe. So without further ado, this is the lineup for today. We'll begin with the Ulema and Mashayikh conference that has been going on at the Pakistan-China Friendship Center in Islamabad, where of course our Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif was the chief guest and our Chief of the Army Staff General Asimmunir was the guest of honor. We'll be highlighting the speech of General Asimmunir and what were the important points that he highlighted in our first segment. Then we will be talking about Islamophobia in the West, especially with reference to what has been happening in the United Kingdom in the last few days with the murder of 3 girls that was pinned wrongly on a Muslim, and that led to all the different riots that happened across the United Kingdom. And it has led to a lot of not only speculation on what racism or where racism stands in the United Kingdom, but also what the government needs to do in order to curb such far rightists and their machinations in order to create instability in the United Kingdom. Then we will be talking about the situation in Bangladesh. We all know that Dr. Muhammadyunus has returned to Bangladesh after his treatment abroad, and now he is all set to lead the interim government, as has been envisaged by the protest demonstrators, the student demonstrators that had been asking since day one that he be leading the interim government. They have many other demands as well, but on the same side, what is very interesting to note is how our neighbor and their neighbor India has been reacting to all of that. We all know that Hasina is currently in India in a safe place, so to speak, received by Ajit Doval when she arrived there. And we also know the relationship between India and Hasina Wajid. But the way the Indian media has been contemplating what has happened in Bangladesh and is pointing fingers not only at Pakistan, which is always does, but also on China and the United States of America. We'll be highlighting different aspects of that in our last segment. So let's begin without further ado with our first story, and that concerns the Ulema and Mashayikh conference and the important points that were raised by our Chief of the Army Staff General Asimmunir at this very conference. We've been joined by Brigadier Retired Ahmed Saeed Minhas. He's a defense analyst. Sir, thank you very much to have joined us. I'm sure you must have heard the Ulema and Mashayikh conference that happened today in Islamabad as well. I'd like to just highlight some of the important aspects of what our Chief of the Army Staff said, and I'd like your point of view on that. Our Chief of the Army Staff talks about corruption as the greatest crime in the sight of Allah. He also says that the Pakistan Army is struggling to end corruption as commanded by the Allah Almighty. And he also said that those who do not believe in Shariat and Constitution, we do not consider them as Pakistanis. How do you see these comments by our Army Chief?
Okay, thank you, Masa, for having me on your show. Today, Chief Army Staff address to the Ulema's conference in Islamabad was was a speech from a very confident Chief Army Staff who leads a professional army, a Muslim army, who leads a Muslim army from the public, who basically looks after the interest of the people, basically. Now, if we just take an account of what Chief Army Staff said in his address, basically it encompassed not only the domestic issues, which were the primary the concerns of the staff. Besides that, also covered the international aspects with regard to the security position of Pakistan and also the regional positions. If you just take an account of the international situation, the happenings around nowadays, so the Chief Army Staff talked about the Palestine issue, in which he demanded for an immediate ceasefire, and also the revision of the borders, geographical borders, what Palestine had back in 1967, prior to that 1967 Arab-Israel war. With regard to the situation in Bangladesh, he basically pointed out towards the Modi, who, while visiting Bangladesh like 2 years before, at the eve of 16 of December 1971, he said that the two-nation theory basically was drowned in the Indian Ocean. So he referred to it and said that all those people who had this impression were like, they were proved wrong, whatever has happened in Bangladesh. With regard to the regional security situation, which the world was also looking at as to what Chief Army Staff was taking position, he talked very candidly about the Kashmir issue, and he said it's an unfinished agenda of the United Nations in which the subcontinent had to be divided, and he very strongly said that all kind of diplomatic, moral, and political support what Pakistan always have been extending to the Kashmiris will continue to pursuing that. With regard to the other regional issue, he talked about the interim government in Afghanistan, where he reminded the interim government of the Taliban in Afghanistan that we looked after you for 40 years in Pakistan, and your one generation basically grew up here, and we did so much for you. So it's now your choice whether you will stand with the Khawarij, the TTP elements, or those terrorists which are hiding on the land of the Afghanistan, or you will continue having a good neighborly relation with the Muslim state who is right next to your borders, and we have been extending you all kind of support. So after the regional and the international security situation, he concentrated basically onto the domestic issues, and the forum which he chose was of the Mashayikh or the Ulema, which not only on Fridays, but daily 5 times they sit on the member of the mosques and they preach the good things. So he basically asked them to preach peace, prosperity, and the restrained behavior and the peaceful behavior they should preach, instead of getting into the turmoil of propaganda and information warfare, because we all know that the world is not going for the kinetic warfare anymore, because the weapons are so lethal nowadays. In the modern world, the option of the kinetic war is not that much possible. So basically, the non-kinetic warfare, in which the propaganda warfare and information warfare, they take lead and they behave like a weapon. So the Chief Army Staff said, asked the ulama to preach the youngsters and all those coming to the mosques and the madrasas where they teach, to preach for the peace, to preach for the nationalism, to preach for the Pakistan, because Pakistan was made in the name of Allah and it has to stay. And he also said that you can count of many Chief Army Staffs, politicians and whatever, but the Pakistan will remain constant. So very, very strong message. With regard to the ulama, he also gave a very strong statement that nobody will be spared who tries to destabilize Pakistan, because Pakistan cannot afford having any kind of destabilization, and the kind of propaganda which is being used through the digital terrorism, using the mobile phone as a weapon, will no longer be spared, because we cannot afford to have a destabilized Pakistan, which ultimately affects the economy and creates a kind of disturbance and low morale of the nation. So he was very candid about that, and he said anyone doing that, and the army will come in and protect not only the physical borders or the geographical borders, but the ideological borders also. He also talked about a very sensitive issue, that is to say the Namus-e Risalat sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that nobody dares saying anything negative about our holy prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace be upon him. All those kind of statements were like very, very strong statements, and he also said that we will not spare anyone. Especially he talked about the Pashtun people, and he praised them that they have given a lot of sacrifices for having peace in the erstwhile FATA and the KPK, and nobody will be allowed to disturb it again. So basically, if we just overall see the statements made by the Chief Army Staff was like of a very, very confident, a proud, a very resilient, professional Chief Army Staff, who was like, besides the Prime Minister, was taking all those kind of position. And it was not only for the domestic audience, but for the international audience as well. So I think it was very timely, very, time-needed kind of statement, and the address and the using and addressing the ulamas, basically, which dominates. And it was a very, very important segment of the society to whom the people they follow, talking to them. So they would become our ambassador and would continue preaching the national perspective of different issues on which multiple number of propagandas and information warfare. They are concentrating on that. So it was like much time needed thing, and the Chief Army Staff handled it very well. Ji.
All right. Brigadier Saab, do you feel that the message has gotten across to all those elements that have been trying to create instability in Pakistan, or are wanting to create a Pakistan that could be not peaceful and not prosperous? And how do you see the resolve not only of the army but also of the ulama and mashayikh in this regard?
The perception, the kind of concern which you have just highlighted, the political government is also trying to do that, and the press information department of the political government, they are doing it. The information ministry is doing that. Our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they are trying to sell the right perspective about the issues. And besides that, DG ISPR has been, he had promised that he would come very frequently now on the television, so that there's no room for any propaganda or for that kind of any anti-state narratives. So now Chief Army Staff talking to the important segment of the Mashayikh will of course will have a place and will ingress into the minds of the ulama, and they would preach. But still there would be a few segments in the society who are adamant to destabilize Pakistan. So for that he said that law enforcement agencies would of course play their role, and all the intelligence agencies and the law enforcement agencies will not spare any such effort, especially those who are using the social media for that. So it would take some time, because the propaganda has really ingressed into our society. But yes, it was a very good effort, and I'm sure that the ulama and mashayikh, when they'll go back to their madrasas and masjids, and they go into the society where they belong to, so I'm sure the right perspective of the national issues would prevail, but of course it would take some time. Yeah.
Thank you so very much, Brigadier Ahmed Saeed Minhas, to have joined us, defense analyst, Brigadier retired Ahmed Saeed Minhas, talking to us about the address to the Ulama and Mashayikh conference by our Chief of the Army Staff, and what the important elements of that address was, and of course how he highlighted different national international issues and how important is it to tackle them as a collective measure with all the parties, including the Ulama and Mashayikh, and of course he highlighted their important role in this context as well. Let's come to our second story, and that concerns Islamophobia in the West. We've been seeing Islamophobia. I mean, let me define Islamophobia for you. It's a fear, it's a prejudice, it's a hatred for Muslims that leads to provocation, hostility and intolerance by means of threatening, harassment, abuse, incitement and intimidation of Muslims and non-Muslims, both in the online and offline world. We've been seeing quite a lot of that since the Palestine war began, whether it be in Palestine or in other parts, even in the United States of America, where people were killed or coerced because of that, and now we are seeing that in the United Kingdom. To discuss the issue that led to this, and what is the current situation in the United Kingdom, and what needs to be done now in the current wake of all the far right extremism that has been highlighted in the United Kingdom through this incident, we've been joined by two guests. Let me introduce them to you one by one. In fact, three guests. Let me introduce them to you one by one. In the studios, we've been joined by AVM retired Ijaz Malik Saab. He is a senior analyst. Thank you very much, sir, to have joined us. And online, we'll be joined by two guests. One is Ambassador Jauhar Saleem, who is a former foreign secretary, as well as the president of IRS, as well as Julius Mbaluto. He's an award-winning journalist and political analyst who joins us from the United Kingdom. I see you, Julius. So welcome to my show, and thank you to have joined us. We'll begin with you, AVM Saab. We are witnessing a rising tide of anti-Muslim hate, bigotry. We saw that rising since 9/11, and since that it has slowly and steadily gained ground. And now, especially since the Palestine war began on the 7th of October last year, we see more and more of that hatred being spewed in different parts of the world, examples of which are rampant in the United States and now in the United Kingdom. Is it already too late, or can we take some measures to stop the spread of this Islamophobia?
Before I answer your question, we have to see how is it being manifested. You have given a very elaborate definition of Islamophobia. Islamophobia essentially, it's operating or manifested at three levels. One is the structure level, wherein we see different legislations which are either directly or indirectly promote hatred against Muslim or marginalize them. And then we have the community level where we see rise in hate groups against Muslims, people objecting to construction of mosques in a particular style. For example, in France we see that they do not want them to construct mosques which is one of their fundamental rights.
And the ban on hijab as well.
Yeah, so they want them to have a mosque like any modern looking structures. And then it is at private level where people do, whenever there is an opportunity, they end up doing harassment or resorting to violence. So these are three different levels where this phenomena operates, and in my opinion it's not only post 9/11, but it has its roots after the Cold War, where the NATO and the then only superpower and the New World Order, which was conceived in early 90s, they required another enemy to have a substantial military operators and to run the American-led military-industrial complex. So they started to promote this. And then we see what happened in France, what is happening in UK now. Incidentally, the areas of Southport and Liverpool and other places, I have been there a number of times, and these are very peaceful neighborhoods. I remember an incident where a Pakistani Muslim small group, they wanted to construct a mosque, and an abandoned church was given to them to convert into mosque. So that was the kind of tolerance which I observed in the 90s or later part of 90s. And now we see those peaceful communities, they are so violent. So what has worked as a catalyst, I think it has deep roots into the pre-planned attitude and behavioral change in the people who matter there. And secondly, more, I think, which is again very relevant, because Muslims' visibility is increasing because of their population size. So because of the economic reasons, that the people, they feel that Muslim growing population would marginalize the other
But I think there are many other reasons as well. Immigration is one, and a lot of natives of countries such as the United Kingdom or maybe France feel that their job quota is being taken over by such, and whereas on the one hand they have certain reservations, on the other hand the way they manifest these reservations is a huge question mark on not only human rights but also talks about racism and so many other things. We will now go to our second guest, Julius Mbaluto. Julius, I hope you're still with us. Julius, when we talk of institutional discrimination or other barriers that violate the human rights and dignity of Muslims, and this diversive rhetoric or misrepresentation that is stigmatizing communities, in your point of view, and I'm sure you have seen that, witnessed it directly or indirectly, who in your point of view is really behind such acts of discrimination, and what do they intend to achieve with it, whether it be in the United Kingdom lately, whether it be the US, whether it be other parts of the world?
That's a very good question. What we have witnessed is a genesis, basically, of why we are where we are right now. And if I just flash back a bit, we see September the 11th in the US, and then therefore war against terror comes in, and then a lot of stereotypes were created. All the time, whenever you see a Muslim person or whenever you see a terror going to do bomb, and then they say Allahu Akbar and all that, there are ignorant people who have equated Islam with this kind of people. But these kind of people who are terrorists are so different from Muslim. Muslim is a peaceful religion. And that's where things started going wrong. Because the moment stereotypes started to come across in different countries, UK and then US, you remember when President Donald Trump was elected, he made derogatory statements like, I'm going to ban Muslims and all those things happening. All this was a build-up, this political build-up which was feeding into these particular stereotypes of who Muslim people were. But Muslim people are not the terrorists that are going to do the terror activity. Muslim people, it's a religion, a peaceful religion. And that divide between the real religion plus, terrorism has haunted us up to where we are right now. I just want to share, most of the time, whenever you saw anyone who looked like a Muslim or whatever, many countries, UK, Paris in France, or even in the US, and you just see them fitting that description, people started to fear. And that's where the problem started. But where we are right now, I can see there's been a huge improvement. And if I can use what has been happening in the UK to give an example, I saw wonderful time in the UK whereby the UK citizens who do not believe in racism, they stood together with Muslim, with black people, with Indians, with ethnic minority. They stood together. And so your question was, is it too late? Can something be done? I've seen a clear indication of what ought to be done, especially using the UK example, which is we need to see Muslim as a religion, Islam as a religion, just like Hindu or Christianity. And the moment we begin to teach, educate people to see that only that's what it's all about, then you see even all these people distancing themselves from what's going on. And I saw great unity in the UK, whereby now, when these racist, ideal guys were coming, you see people standing with Muslims and say, no. We stand for peace, we stand for love, not hate. And when you see people starting to be educated to that level, they would drop all these stereotypes that have been planted in the minds of many by politicians and by politics. Of course, politics, they come with ideologies of different countries, which are serving the interests of those countries that hold them. So when we have the masses educated to differentiate the religion plus the people, so that if someone commits a crime, it's just a criminal and they'll be prosecuted, that will not affect any other person. Let me give an example. UK, for example, why is EDL protesting? Because even if you see these 3 girls who were murdered, whoever did it was caught, you leave it at there. It's a criminal offense. He will be prosecuted. You face full force of the law. Why do you go out there protesting? And no one, actually, it was misinformation. He wasn't even a Muslim. So you see across the country in the UK, people protesting. For what? If I was to flash back not long ago, there's a doctor who was English doctor. She was killing children in the hospital. People did not protest. Those children were more than the 3. People did not protest. Why? Because she was a criminal. She was prosecuted for her crime. And that's what it's supposed to be all about, really. All these other narratives.
That brings me to a very important point, Julius. That brings me to a very important point. How should criminals like those who belong to the EDL or even those far-right extremists who have been propagating hatred and Islamophobia online, especially in the wake of the murder of these 3 girls, how should they be dealt with? I know that the current government in the UK wants to take stern measures, but what needs to be exactly done so that such events are not repeated?
With the society, I saw a very great move in the UK, I think yesterday or the day before, whereby we had imams going across the Muslim community, telling them, don't put on your masks. We are not criminals. We represent peace. Let us be seen. And that is one moment whereby you see leaders talking peace, directing communities how to behave. in the moment of attack. And that moment when you see now themselves distancing themselves, they don't come with the balaclavas and they ready for war. They are like, no, we are who we are. We represent peace. The moment you see that, even all these who come to attack them, these thugs from EDL, when they come to attack, they are clearly visible even to the police. And you see, one of the things is stay on the side of the law of the land, basically. But remember what your religion represents and pursue that to the end. As in terms of the law, application of the law, I've seen, which again I support, the Prime Minister Keir Starmer, he has come outright condemning this EDL, calling them political thugs. And definitely we have seen a lot of arrestment, and also the judiciary here in the UK has been given the chance to fast track cases. So we already seen people who have been sentenced. I think that zero tolerance from the politician, from the government, and also education coming from the leaders in the Islamic community, that goes a long way so much to make a difference. Because at the end of the day, I've seen a lot of people say, hey, don't blame anyone. When you talking about people takes your jobs, some of these people are coming out. When you challenge them, who took your job? Did you make an application? They're like, yeah, but why did you not get it? You say, I had a criminal record. How does that go to the immigrant, who took your job? You cannot get a job because you have a criminal conviction. It's not the fault of other people. It's not the fault of the Muslim community. So
Julius, to be very frank, what I feel that the people in the United Kingdom want to see swift justice in the wake of all the unrest that has happened in the country, and a non-repetition of such events. Legislation may be in such a way that such events do not happen, whether it be offline or online. We're a bit short of time, Julius, but I would love to talk to you again on a later date. Thank you very much, Julius Mbaluto, award-winning journalist and political analyst, joining us from the United Kingdom. Thank you so very much to have given us your eminent point of view on this burning issue. Let's come to you, AVM Saab. AVM Saab, the rallies were advertised not only offline but also online on far-right social media channels under the banner "Enough is enough." Deliberately to create unrest and racial prejudice within the United Kingdom, where we see that, but it was kind of underhand. We didn't see that openly, but now we have seen such racism erupt openly, just like we saw this racism erupt openly once Donald Trump came into power. What I'd like to understand is the British lawmakers accuse social media sites of fueling the violence. But I'd also like to, add to one comment. The owner of X, Elon Musk, angers the US government with a series of provocative tweets, including one that says that a British civil war is inevitable. How important is the role of social media so that this violence that is being promoted could be curbed? B, how much of a responsible attitude should people like Elon Musk also show when it comes to such topics and issues that anger a country, that create Islamophobia, that give rise to racial prejudice?
I think this is a very sensitive matter, and once we profess civil liberties and freedom of expression, this is very much dovetailed with the same freedoms that people, while a group has or an individual has liberty to express himself or herself, the other person has equal liberties to worship or to practice whatever they want to. And even in UK, their Criminal Justice and Public Order Act of 94, it was subsequently amended through Section 3A, and it stops any hate speech or even gesturing, and for that matter, any behavior publicly. So why don't they apply that? But unfortunately, we see that there is a parliamentarian, Mr. Nigel, he speaks on the floor of their parliament, and he is, promoting or indirectly through his comments against this particular issue. So the government has to exercise. I think this is a bigger challenge for the current Labour Party, because they are being criticized
just a month after coming to
just
power.
a month into power, and they have this major crisis, and they have to see the longer perspective of this, because if it continues to simmer and continue to expand, this is a very fiery thing. I think this is a time that we should utilize all possible sources to create awareness and interfaith harmony.
And to tell people how peaceful a religion Islam is.
First of all, we shouldn't be apologetic being Muslims. We should be rather forthcoming to express ourselves, because Islam has so much to offer, not only to Muslims but to others.
And that is being misconstrued by so many other
Yes.
across the
the responsibility is on the Muslim communities also. And last comment, unfortunately, the kinds of people who migrated from British colonies to UK, I mean, they have increased in numbers, but they haven't been able to produce too many role models who could influence
so what you want to say is that there needs to be a joint responsibility by all the factors involved.
Exactly.
All right, point taken. Let's come to Jauhar Saleem Saab, who joins us from abroad. He's the president of IRS as well as the former foreign secretary and a regular in our show. Jauhar Saleem Saab, thank you very much to have joined us and to have taken time. Jauhar Saleem Saab, I'd like to understand, you know, there are different groups which monitor anti-Muslim incidents. It has one of those in the United Kingdom, which is called TEL-MAMA, has received 500 calls and online reports of anti-Muslim behavior from across the United Kingdom in the past few weeks, which is a 5-fold increase from the week before. A lot of people say that this anti-Muslim hate in the UK has been spewing or increasing since the Palestine crisis began, or the war began on the 7th of October 2023. Do you feel that the Palestine situation is one of the major causes to be blamed when it comes to the rise of extremism or racism or Islamophobia in countries such as the United Kingdom?
Yes. The situation is very unfortunate the way it's unfolding, and I actually happen to be in London right now, so it's kind of, we're seeing it up close in that way, the sentiments of the people here. While a vast majority of people in the UK, it's only 8% of the people who have expressed any sympathy or sort of, you know, consonance with the writers. The vast majority opposes it. But the fact remains that, as you've rightly said, it's not just, since the Palestinian conflict, the Gaza conflict, since October 7th, there has been, the polarization has been increasing. But I think even prior to that, years before, like the rise of AfD in Germany, the rise of, far right in many other European countries, such as Hungary, and then in the US, President Trump's rhetoric at the time, and other groups who were supporting. So we saw a global rise in the power and the ideology of far right everywhere. And that was in response to various factors. One was this immigration everywhere. Like in Germany, we saw, in many other European countries, we saw in the UK as well, immigration is probably one of the biggest factors. But other factors are the failure of capitalism to address some of its basic contradictions, because this inequality which has been rising, this trickle-down economics in play everywhere, is giving rise to a huge inequality where the top 1% are literally exploiting all the resources of the economies everywhere now. And that has led to a disaffected middle class, that has led to a disaffected youth everywhere, who can't afford housing, who can't afford the lifestyles that they think they deserve. So I think, sometimes they blame the immigrants, because they think the immigrants are taking their jobs, and they blame immigrants for the rise in crime that they witness in many of these countries. So I think there's a multitude of factors, but it's very interesting and very ironical in some ways that in recent elections in the UK, what actually led to the winning of Labour Party more than perhaps everything else was the rise of far right, because the Conservative vote split. The Nigel Farage party got almost 14% reform. UK, similarly, are some other parties as well. So and for the first time, there was his 8th attempt to contest an election, and he finally got into the parliament, and 8 of the members of his party got in. And as a result, the mainstream party's share went down, and particularly Conservatives, and that's what catapulted Labour into power. But ironically, just 1 month after taking power, they have been confronted by the same reality now in a different way. These are the biggest riots that have taken place in the UK, if some people say ever, but at least after 2011. And they are taking place in the length and breadth of the UK, dozens of cities literally, including cities like London, Manchester, Birmingham, Nottingham, the bigger cities in the UK, and as well as Wales and Northern Ireland. But on the positive side, the Labour government was criticised in the beginning, for their failure to control and contain.
The fact is that, a month after the new government comes, they are, of course, faced with a huge dilemma. And let's hope that they manage to curtail it before this further spreads in different parts of the UK, because this also shows one side of the extremism that was there, that was sithering, and slowly and steadily we have seen that boiling in front, and measures maybe need to be taken in order for that simmering of racial tensions to also cool down. I'd like to come to my second and my last, in fact, story, and that concerns Bangladesh. And I'll begin with you, Jauhar Saleem Saab. Since Hasina Wajid entered the on the Indian soil, received by Ajit Doval, and currently still is in India, there have been different rumor mongering, let's put it that way, or posturing as far as what happened in Bangladesh. Now, in the parliament, the External Affairs Minister Jai Shankar says India was maintaining a wait-and-watch strategy, and he expressed concerns for the minorities and their property, in this case, of course, the Hindus. In your point of view, what is India's positioning on Bangladesh, especially after Hasina Wajid has resigned and sought refuge in India for the moment, and of the violent protests that ensued? How do you feel India's positioning will be in the foreign affairs paradigm vis-a-vis Bangladesh once this new interim government takes over? Will India be still having preferential status as far as Bangladesh is concerned?
I think this is a massive change, and perhaps Indian government and Indian policymakers would be in some sort of a disbelief and shock, because this has been so sudden. I don't think they predicted that, because what they've done for the last many years, that they have been trying to propel and strengthen Hasina Wajid, because since the 90s we have seen that ever since Khalid took power in 1990. First of all, these two ladies have been taking turn, but for the last 14-15 years, Khalid has been in power consistently, and in fact had established some sort of a civilian dictatorship with India's help. And that was a very pro-Indian government. Her total focus was on on building and strengthening that constituency, the pro-Indian constituency within Bangladesh, and in some ways anti-Pakistan constituency, because she was really using that propaganda about 1971 events everywhere and relentlessly, and also she was trying to and I think that marked the end of her regime as well. The last action, the discriminatory job quota for the what they termed the heroes of the 1971 events, their families. That is what infuriated the students and sparked this. But I think while that might have sparked it, the fact is that there was a deep-rooted, simmering sort of disaffection and discontent against her policies, and what she had done, for instance, in terms of fundamental freedoms, in what she had done in terms of literally incarcerating the opposition, detaining all major leaders, implicating them in false cases in many instances. and all that, and now this time, although during this time Bangladesh had done remarkably well economically, but the reasons for that were different. In fact, part of the reason was Grameen Bank and muhammadyunus remarkable sort of
What is happening in Bangladesh, and how India is concerned with the concern that we are seeing very open and very rampantly and very progressively as well in their media channels. Thank you very much to have joined us, Jauhar Saleem Saab, and I'll ask my last question to you, AVM Saab. AVM Saab, the coup conspiracies that are being talked about in all the major Indian channels. I mean, I have all the list, whether it be Doordarshan or the Times Now or Republic Bharat, footprint of extremism, Jamaat Islami was written over the agitation. Republic TV says global powers behind unrest, Pakistan, China, the US are all behind this coup that happened. Was this a student protest or an Islamist takeover? Conspiracy angle, NDTV 24/7 talks about, India Today talks about that all of this was plotted in London, executed in Dhaka, and the list goes on. I have a whole list. What is the methodology behind this media madness? Has India kind of, I wouldn't like to use the term, but lost its marbles, especially the media people, because of the way the changes are happening in Bangladesh, and they are just pointing fingers at whosoever they can?
I would tend to agree what Ambassador Saab said, that probably they were not prepared for this kind of sudden, eruption of what happened. So the RAW and the Indian government, they just pulled out the same playbook which they have been using in Kashmir and replaced the word of Kashmir with Bangladesh, and they are blaming the Muslims, they are blaming the Pakistani influence, the Jamaat Islami, or whatever they want.
China, the US,
yes.
And the list goes on.
Yeah, so this is just, I think, a very irresponsible kind of knee-jerk response to an event which they failed to foresee, because they definitely, it indicates a panic, because they have cultivated, they have invested a lot in the outgoing regime. So they per se thought that this is an extension of their policies and exercising influence in the region. But now with the change of government, probably there would be it would be dented, and the new regime, the technocrat regime, I think which under Mr. Yunus, probably they will focus on further economic
let's see, because
development.
he's got his Nobel, he's a Nobel laureate, and his work is in economy.
And he has his roots and following in masses. So that, and the kind of vibrant communities we have. In
and the same guy who had been, there was almost 100 cases against him by the previous regime, and there was over 6-month imprisonment. Thank you very much, AVM Saab. We are a bit short of time, but thank you so very much to have stayed on with us during the entire show. AVM, Ijaz, Malik Saab, senior analyst. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of today's newsroom. See you inshallah tomorrow with new stories and segments that pertain to US and Pakistan. Allah Hafiz.